Good morning, everyone. Good morning, and welcome back. Welcome back to the PorscheCooled Podcast. It's Owner's Stories today. Steve's not here. It's not Friday's episode. It's Tuesday's episode, and shortly I'm going to be joined by another Porsche enthusiast, another Porsche owner. This is PorscheCooled Owner Stories. Like I said, this is where are we? Number 37. Number 37 already. It's crazy how quickly we're going through the numbers here. Soon we'll be up to 50 owner stories. I mean, I've had a pretty crazy response actually for this series, and I keep saying it every intro to every owner stories every week, and you guys are probably getting a little bit sick of hearing it, but it's quite difficult to keep track of and keep up with actually. There's a lot of you guys out there who are just so enthusiastic and just really want to come on and tell your story, and I'm trying to get everyone on. So I apologize to the people that I haven't got back to. I apologize to the people that I haven't scheduled yet. I will get back to you, and I will eventually get you on the podcast. I don't forget about it. I write everyone's names down, and I always have a list of who I have to go through. It's Saturday today. I'm recording this on a Saturday. I always record these a couple of weeks in advance. I always have a couple up my sleeve just in case my daily work life gets a bit crazy. I'm in the UK. It's bank holiday weekend, so that'll pinpoint the time for you guys who are in the UK. You know what's going on. I think it's Memorial Day in the US. It's early Saturday morning. I'm going to get Ben. He's almost ready to come online. This is through Zoom, as you guys always know. And we're going to get Ben on the line from the UK. And he's going to talk about his PorscheCooled owner story. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to Owner's Stories. Like I said, this is number 37. Today, I am joined by Ben, and Ben is in Sheffield. Good morning, Ben. How are you?
Morning, Michael. Good, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
No, thanks for coming on. I'm glad we managed to schedule a time pretty close to when you messaged me, actually. It hasn't been that many weeks, has it? It's only been a few weeks, I think, since we first started chatting about you coming on the podcast.
No, you've got a lot of interest, so I'm just very grateful for the opportunity.
So Owner's Stories, all the listeners always enjoy the first question. I've had a lot of people reach out to me and say they always like the first question and the last question, or the first chat and the last chat of the Owner's Stories series. So we always like to begin where it all started for you, where it all started with Porsche, where it all started with your car journey. Was Porsche something that you noticed when you were a kid? Like, did a neighbor have one? Did a family member have one? Or was it sort of like me, where it happened much later in life, and I started noticing them due to friends like Steve, and then eventually bit the bullet and bought one? How did it all start for you, Ben?
I'd say a bit of both, really, to be honest, Michael. One of my earliest car memories was being taken to school by my neighbour, who happened to be a teacher at the school that I was at. Now, she did not have a Porsche. She had a rusty blue Austin Maestro, which was as far away from a Porsche as you could get. But on the way to school, we passed a local garage, and I think it must have the owner from that I didn't really know what it was at the time, but it was the classic 911 turbo with the big whale's tail spoiler, bright red, and his license plate was 25 LOW, which read as too slow.
Oh, right.
And I used to see this every morning from the age of must have been about 9 till about 11, and thinking that is a thing that I want at some point. So that would be my first sort of Porsche memory. And then it all went a bit quiet, really. And then my dad really, I don't know how this came about. He went to a Porsche dealer, and one of the cars that he test drove was a 924. And I have a memory of us being in it must have been the back. So I'm assuming they had small seats in the back and we would have been little.
Yes.
And being bounced around the country lane in the back of a 924 with a Porsche dealer. And then he bought us. Sorry, go on.
So did he buy the car?
No, he did not. So he in many ways went as far away from that as possible, and we ended up with a Saab 9.5 turbo. He wanted a safe car, a reliable car, essentially a tank on four wheels. And this was, from what I could gather, as far away from a 924 as possible.
It is. It's far away, but it's a pretty cool car to choose. You know what I mean? Like your dad's obviously got a bit of style to him to pick a 9.5 turbo. You know what I mean? Like it's a pretty cool car, and it's getting a lot more sort of interest now again, isn't it? The Saabs, people are starting to look at them again, the 9.3 turbos and the 9.5 turbos and things like that. So he obviously had good taste in cars, or has good taste in cars.
Well, at the time, in hindsight, I was devastated. I thought this was the worst thing ever, and gone from could have had a Porsche to we've got this, and it was like a maroon brown color, so it wasn't even a good color.
Okay.
And to make it worse, we took it to a wildlife safari park, and the monkeys came and chewed big chunks off the rear rubber spoiler. So it looked
really
after a while like it was not.
I'll take that
upgrade.
Back then.
But now,
yeah.
Now, yes, and a Saab Turbo is a very cool car, but at the time, I was devastated.
All right, so you've seen that really cool one with the 911 with the plates. Your dad test drives a 924. He doesn't get it. So when you start your car journey, what is the first sort of memorable car that you start driving or you purchase for the first time?
Well, memorable would be for the wrong reasons. Is I learned to drive on my mum's Volvo 340 GL, which if you were looking for an armoured car on wheels, then this would be the closest thing to it. And it was sort of the exact opposite of what you wanted as a teenage boy to be driving.
Yeah.
And I think I always had that memory of Porsche in the back of my mind, thinking I just want something. At some point, I want something nice. And I bought my first car, which was a Peugeot 306. I wanted a GTI, but I couldn't afford a GTI. So I had a bright red 306, and maybe it was red because of the Porsche that I saw, but it was just seemed like a decent car as the first one. And I'd say my first proper car would be my next one, which was a Mark V Golf GTI.
Okay, so good driver's car. So you wanted the GTI and the 306. I had a 206. I wanted the GTI as well, but I only bought the 206. Okay, so you're getting into driver's cars. The GTI is a great car. So then when do you start thinking, okay, and I just want to tell the listeners, we've got a few cars to get through here, so I want to get straight into the Porsche thing now. But when do you start thinking, okay, I'm going to buy a 911 or I'm going to buy a Porsche, I'm going to buy a Boxster? When does that start happening?
So 911s were always out of my price range, really. You know, I was early 20s at this point, so it was just largely unattainable. But starting work, having a little bit of disposable income in my back pocket, always looking for the next thing, the next car. You know, this car was only a stepping stone to the next car. And there was two things really that sort of pushed me towards getting my first Porsche. On the walk into university, we got passed on a daily basis by a dark blue, I don't know what the color would be, 993 Carrera 4S. Okay. And the noise this thing would make just accelerating out of the junction was just the best thing that I remember hearing on a daily basis. But that was out of my price range. But driving around, I was stuck behind a Boxster. And this is the first time I'd seen one in the flesh.
Yep.
And again, the noise that made accelerating off the lights just planted that seed of, this is a thing that I just need. I don't know how I can make this work from a numbers side of things, but I just need this in my life. And suddenly the Golf GTI seemed very boring and seemed very ordinary.
That's the problem though, isn't it? When you start noticing Porsche and you start looking at them, all of the cars do look a little bit boring. I mean, unless you're going, supercar or Ferrari or something like that, I guess. But all those other cars that you thought were really cool, like the hot hatches, they're still kind of cool, but they just don't match up to the Porsche.
No, you're very right. And as soon as you start noticing them, you see them everywhere, and almost getting sort of trolled on a daily basis of cars that you could have had. Okay,
so what year are we now? We're in what year when you buy your first Porsche?
So this would be probably just after the millennium, so sort of 2001, 2002.
Okay, so 2001, you've seen that Boxster, you've admired the Boxster. The 911's a bit too expensive at the time. What do you start looking for? Do you start looking for a Boxster straight away, or you still test the waters with 911 to see if there's one cheap enough?
No, I'm a horribly impulsive, or I certainly was at that time, impulsive car buyer. So I've changed now, but it was looking on Auto Trader on a Friday, I went with my best friend on a Saturday to a garage not a million miles from where we were, looked at the car, bought the car in basically the space of a day. In hindsight, probably it wasn't the right car to buy. It was quite a leggy, not desperately well looked after, very early sort of 2.5 Boxster.
Okay. So tell the listeners exactly what you bought. The color, I mean, you said it's a 2.5, so it's the first early model. Just tell the listeners exactly what you bought, Ben.
So this was I think it was a 98 registered 2.5 Boxster in Arctic silver, black leather interior. It had done probably about 1,000 miles at the time, which didn't seem a lot, but to be honest, I didn't really know enough to do sort of due diligence. I wasn't patient enough to do due diligence. And in hindsight, probably this wasn't the right car. It had a number of things that were cosmetically needed sorted, but I couldn't really see those sort of at the time. I just wanted the car.
Okay. So this wasn't from a Porsche dealer. This was from just an independent dealer that you found the car?
No, at the time, we didn't have a Porsche dealer in our city. So the closest one was about an hour's drive at least. So there was nothing local to us in terms of how to get it. And I was a little bit hesitant about going in there as a sort of, slightly scruffy 24-year-old, compared to some of the cars on offer. So it was very much a local dealer, no real warranty to speak of, and a little bit of a gamble, which paid off, but it was still quite a gamble.
So this is early 2000s?
Yes, that'd be about right.
So early 2000s, and the car is how many years old?
So that would have been about, I think it was about sort of three and a half years old.
Okay, so it's only 3.5 years old. It's not that old at the time. It's a reasonably new car. When you buy a 3-year-old car, you always have that in the back of your mind. Well, this is what I have in the back of my mind. It's like, well, how much could be wrong with it really? It's only 3 years old. It's still reasonably new. It's obviously out of warranty, out of Porsche warranty. When you purchased a car and you took it home for the first time, was there anything that surprised you, Ben, that was seriously wrong with the car?
No, mechanically it was pretty sound actually. So the first 6 months or so were trouble free, no issues whatsoever at all. I needed to change the tires. I wanted to do a few little cosmetic things. At the time, it had the amber indicator sections on the front lamps, and I think the updated version had just come out where it had the clear lenses, and I wanted to change those. So there were some cosmetic things that I wanted to do, which I did pretty quick actually. But in terms of mechanical issues, no problems at all for the first 6 months, and then I had an issue with the heat shields, and the exhaust blew on the way back from work, which transformed it from a Boxster into what sounded like a full-on GT race car. But actually, mechanically, that car was very sound.
So let's go back to the experience. Let's go back to that experience. You've been waiting for quite some time. This is your first Porsche. How did it feel when you took it on that first spirited drive in your area where you live?
I was a bit nervous. I hadn't had a rear-engined car before. Mine had all been sort of front-wheel drive. I mean, the GTI was pretty torquey, so it would spin its wheels in first and second gear. But this felt different. And I remember coming out of a roundabout, slightly off camber, slightly cold morning, and the back end just stepped out with just a bit of throttle. I remember thinking, oh, this is different. You've just got to be a little bit careful here when you're learning how to drive this thing. So the handling felt different, but the handling felt so sharp. The sound was the thing that first really sort of sucked me in. You had the mechanical engine noise literally just behind your head. You could hear sort of induction roar. You could hear exhaust roar. And this was thought this is it in terms of cars. This is what I want. And I was delighted, absolutely delighted with it.
Yeah, it is that first drive in a Boxster or in a 911. It really is a different experience to anything else, isn't it? It really is, because it is that weight transfer. It is the mid-engine or the rear engine. It really does feel completely different to any other car. So how long did you own the first Boxster for? Obviously, you still don't own that car now. So how long did you own that car for?
So I probably had that about 3 years. And I think when I was younger, I had a horrible tendency to sort of keep a car for probably 2-3 years, and then the next new shiny thing would come along, and then I'd find a reason as to justify why I needed to change, when in hindsight I probably should have kept those cars a bit longer. The sort of the newer models were coming out. My car suddenly didn't look quite as sharp as it did a while back, and there was just starting to get a few little niggles with it that needed changing every time it went to the dealer. We'd got a Porsche dealer by that time. It just started getting bigger bills. Not massive problems, but just enough that made me think mechanically there's a big bill around the corner. And I'm ashamed to say I swapped it for a BMW E46 M3.
Did you? Okay, we'll get into that. So the Boxster, though, when you bought it, it's a few years old. How was the IMS issue at the time when you bought that? Was it something that you'd heard about, or was it something that was there, or you didn't really know much about it?
I had zero clue that this was even a thing.
Okay.
So up until probably relatively recently, it only really dawned on me that I had a couple of cars that were prone to this issue. So either I was lucky or I just didn't keep the car enough. I mean, I drove it daily to and from work, literally every day, all weathers.
Okay.
And it never really missed a beat in terms of the engine.
Oh, that's great.
And local dealers that I took it to, independents rather than the main dealer for sort of non sort of service work, all gave it a clean bill of health. So I was probably in blissful ignorance, really. I just hadn't really heard of it. I didn't really know about it. And in many ways, probably, I suspect that was a little bit more enjoyable rather than always thinking, looking under the car for a puddle that was never going to be there.
Yeah, true. You just enjoyed the car. So, okay, so you sell it and you buy your BMW, you buy the M3.
That was another silver. I'm horribly unoriginal in my car colors. That was the E46 and it had the SMG gearbox.
Oh, okay. And how was that car compared to the Boxster that you just came out of? How did it feel in driving experience?
It was faster, but it wasn't as much fun on a Peak District twisty road.
Right.
But I was sort of needing a little bit more space. We were, going to move at some point, so I just needed that little bit more practicality that I couldn't really get. Although the Boxster with its front and back boots had a huge amount of luggage space, it just wasn't quite the right layout. And there was times where I needed to carry 4 adults from time to times, and this is sort of what pushed me towards it.
Yeah, and the M3s are good cars, though. I mean, they're popular cars, and they're still a popular model today. So did you keep that car? Did you keep the BMW M3 for as long as the Boxster, or shorter period?
So I kept that for about probably another 3 years.
Okay.
And then, if I'm honest, I probably started getting a little bit bored of the day-to-day driving experience. I found with the sort of the M cars, and I've sort of had another M3 since, is that when you're commuting around and in sort of traffic, for a lot of the time, you can't really tell it's an M car. The opportunities to really test the handling, test the performance, hear the engine noise are very limited, and I just found that it just wasn't really rewarding enough on a day-to-day basis compared to the Boxster.
So the Boxster was, sorry, Ben, the Boxster was a manual, wasn't it?
It was, yes.
So how did you find the SMG? Because the SMG had a few issues on certain years, didn't it? Was it a reliable transmission?
Well, it's funny you say issues, actually, is that reliability, no problems at all. I liked it because it had a reputation for being really jerky and very, very clunky.
Yes.
But on full upshifts, on full throttle, I really, really liked the sort of feeling that a gear was disengaging and then another gear was engaging.
Okay.
And you'd get almost a bit of a smack in the back of the head as the gear re-engaged. And that felt, I really enjoyed that sensation of something happening. The worst thing about that gearbox is changing down. It had a tendency to have a really long think about it before it selected your gear.
Okay.
So slowing down to a roundabout and then moving off the roundabout was, quite frankly, at times it felt dangerous, because the time you wanted to go would be the time it would have a think about which gear and then find you second gear. And then when you did go, you'd almost go like a stabbed rat and fishtailing your way around the roundabout. So that was the worst thing about it, but I could live with that. You just had to sort of change down early rather than change down just as you wanted to go.
Did BMW try to do any fixes to that transmission, or they couldn't do fixes? I can't remember.
I think I had a software update at some point, but I really liked the sort of clunkiness of it. It sort of felt like it had a bit of character to it.
Yes.
You sort of had to know how to really drive it and learn how to use it. And I have to say that I found that quite charming, really. So the sort of sensation that you had to, here was something you had to really understand so it didn't stick you in the back of a bus when you're coming out of a roundabout.
Yeah, character to the car. So, okay, so the trend here is, there's a bit of a trend going on. There's a trend with, they're drivers' cars. You are buying drivers' cars. You've had the GTI, you went into the 306, you got the M3. So do we go into a Porsche next, or do we go into something else?
We go back into another Porsche. We go into a 987 Boxster S.
Okay, so a 987. So this is going back to when you had your other Boxster. You said it was looking a little bit old, a little bit tired. Is that the reason why you wanted to get into the newer model? And also you've gone up in power as well, because you got into an S, right? The first one was just a standard, a base. Yeah,
I mean, driving around in 2.5, there were S's around, and I became very aware that I had the 2.5, and that wasn't even because there was an upgraded engine. It went to the 2.7, so I had the very lowest power. And there was little cosmetic things like the S it had the S on the back. It had I was going to
say, Ben, sorry for interrupting. I was going to say, it's that S on the back, isn't it? Every time I used to see one, it was like the one with the S on the back just looks better. It's no different really, but it's just that S.
It looked better. It sounded better. The twin exhausts were a thing. Every time I looked at mine, it just had one. And it was just that little C that says, here's something that's better than what you've got. And I just couldn't shake that. So when it was when I wanted to get another, and it was another Boxster I wanted, then it was always going to be an S, always going to be the I think it was a 3.2, I want to say 3.2 S.
So where did you find that car? How did you come about that car?
So again, it was on Auto Trader, and I just happened to be looking, and my local dealer, so we had a dealer in Sheffield by this time, they had one in GT Silver. And the only thing that I wasn't sure about is it had a grey leather interior.
Okay.
And in the pictures on the dealer website, the grey looks quite light. It almost, I'm not sure whether it was the lighting, but it looked really very light. And I remember thinking, this car has virtually everything I want. It's got Litronics, it's got heated seats, it's got sat nav, it's got Bose, it's got all the sort of extras that I really thought this would make it a car, because my previous Boxster had virtually nothing on it, so that was really poorly spec'd. But this was a nicely spec'd car, but it was the grey leather interior. It had nice contrast stitching on it, and I wasn't sure.
So when you went to see the car, the grey interior was okay. It wasn't as bad as what you thought.
I preferred it. When I sat in it, I remember thinking, actually, this is nice. This looks slightly different to black, which I felt could just get a little bit lost in the silver. I'd stuck a lot of silver bits onto my previous one to try and lift the interior, but this had some of the silver trim, and I thought actually I prefer this.
So it's well optioned. It's from a good dealer. Is it low mileage or high mileage?
That was low mileage again. That was, I think, 18,000 miles at the time.
And warranty or no warranty?
Yeah, full Porsche warranty. So it had the 2-year warranty on it. And the dealer, we went out for a test drive. And before I'd even turned the key, I knew I was buying this car. So I had to pretend to be not particularly excited, make the I'm not particularly impressed noises, try and play hard to get. And I knew that I was having this car. It's just trying to play the game of trying to make it as relatively inexpensive as possible, even though it was going to be quite expensive.
Yeah, so you're getting it from a dealer. You don't bother doing a PPI because it has the warranty, correct? It's already
correct.
It's got warranty, so that's enough reassurance for you. So we're going up quite a lot in price from the 986, though, aren't we? From a 986 standard to a 987 Boxster S. How old was the Boxster S at the time?
So that was, again, about 18 months old. So that was a 2005 car. And I think it was 2006 that I picked this up.
Okay, so it's pretty new, so therefore the depreciation probably hasn't hit in fully, so it's still a reasonably expensive car.
It was for me at the time, but one of my long-term problems, and I guess it is a problem, I guess, if you speak to certain people, is that I spend more of my salary than is healthy on a car. But, for me, the reward and the enjoyment of driving it every day, justified it. I could easily justify that. It wasn't an issue to me, and I don't regret that for an instant. But yes, and absolutely a significant hike in price for me at the time.
Okay. The listeners of the podcast, there's a lot of listeners who are wanting to get into Porsche. They're wanting to get into 911. I mean, as we know, 911 prices now are going crazy. 996s are becoming harder to obtain in certain countries. I mean, UK, they're still reasonably priced, but in Australia, etc., they're not. If someone's looking at a Boxster and they the 986s come up, and I see them come up, and they're quite inexpensive, especially the 2.5s. Would you say spend that little bit of extra money and get the 987? How is the difference in the driving experience and in the feel between the 986 and the 987?
The most obvious thing for me would be the difference between the 2.5 and the 3.2, 3.4. So that extra power, I think, makes the difference. So whether it's a 986 or a 987, for me, the chassis is so good and the handling is so good. The extra power that you can get from a slightly bigger engine would be the thing that I would sort of think about more than anything else. But I don't think either of those cars dynamically are found wanting. And even now, I think you'd find them very rewarding to drive. So I'm not sure I'd be particularly picky about which one. I like the looks of the 987 more than the 986. I think the headlights are a little bit more sorted. I never was a massive fan of the teardrop headlights, but now they're sort of like a very, very classic design. And when I see them on the road now, I have really sort of fond memories of that car.
Yeah, and I guess the 987 is the interior is very similar to the 997, and the 986 is similar interior in a way to the 996, isn't it? It's kind of like that's the sort of comparison that you could make.
Yeah, and you're right. Actually, the step up in interior is probably the big thing. I think the 986 interior, the buttons on that always felt a little bit plasticky and like they would almost fall off every time you pressed them. And the sort of the 987, the step up in quality was quite noticeable. Everything just felt a lot more premium than it did on the previous one.
Yeah, I think I have to agree. When you see the interior, it is a big difference. So the 987 Boxster S, was there anything that you added to the car during your ownership? Were there any mods that you did? Did it have a good exhaust note? Did it have the sports exhaust or a better exhaust on it? What did you add to your Boxster?
I added nothing.
Nothing.
It had the sports exhaust, and I wanted to keep it under Porsche warranty because I was a little bit frightened that the bills were going to be, if something went wrong with it, the bills were going to be quite a lot out of warranty. So I kept it completely standard. I don't think I changed a thing to that car, and I didn't really want to. I like the wheels. It had the lobster claw wheels, which I really liked. So bar just sort of brake pads and discs and tires and wear and tear, I didn't change a thing with that car.
That's fantastic. I guess you did say it's a well-optioned car too, so what really do you need to add as well? I do actually like the Boxsters with the lobster claws, actually. I mean, I've got the lobster claws on my 997, but I think they look great on the Boxster as well.
Easy to clean as well, that was the other thing.
Absolutely, they are. They're very easy to clean. All right, so you're enjoying this Boxster S. There's a trend here. You like the Boxster. And you like the drop top version. You like the open air, the sound, the mid-engine sort of feel of the car. What makes you sell this car? Because you sold this one as well. So what made you think, okay, I need something different now? So
this was a decision that I was forced into rather than wanted to do. My son was a few years old at this time, and he came round in the front seat, in his child seat. But then child 2 came along, and no longer could the Boxster be used as a sort of transport. I couldn't take the kids in it. Yes. I had no other car. I had no access to another car. This was my only car. Okay. It was my work commute car, nursery pickup car. So I had to sell that car, and it's the only car that I regretted selling. all the
Right.
previous ones I'd wanted to upgrade. This one I didn't. I was very happy with it. And if I could have kept it, I would have kept it, but I couldn't. So
Okay.
it had to go, unfortunately.
So you start looking for more of a family car then? So this is the transition period where you go into something like a SUV, or what happens?
Again, SUVs have never held any kind of interest to me whatsoever. I remember getting a Cayenne as a courtesy car from the dealer and thinking, this is like a tank. I'm looking down on people in buses. I feel like I'm driving along a motorway in the top deck of a double decker. I just didn't get on with it. So it was never that. So I remember thinking, what is the fastest, best handling 4-seater sports car that I can get and legitimately call a family car? And it was a E92 M3.
Okay, so you go into the M3 again. It's a sensible choice. I mean, it is a good driver's car once again, and it's practical. How was the ownership experience of that M3 compared to your first one?
Quite similar in that mechanically both cars were absolutely bulletproof. I had not one mechanical issue on either of those cars, and apart from servicing, no error lights, no nothing. They never went back to the dealer for anything. So as daily propositions, they were brilliant. And I still couldn't think of a better car that I could have got. I was tempted by the RS4 at the time.
Okay, yeah.
But they were a little bit older, examples wise. And I just liked the look of the power dome on the M3. I thought they looked great. I thought they sounded great. And once I'd sort of decided that's what I wanted, it turned out that's what I got. And it was the right decision. It was a supremely comfortable way. It had a lot of space for 4 adults. And it was a great car for what I needed at the time.
So how was the transmission on the updated M3 compared to the SMG?
I guess you could call it more refined. I didn't like it as much. It was...
So not as enjoyable, not as mechanical, not as...
It was
as an
smooth.
experience? Yeah.
If you were commuting in stop-start traffic, you'd say it was infinitely better. But as sort of a bit of fun, it just didn't have it. It just felt too refined, too smooth. I liked the jerkiness, I liked the clunkiness, and it didn't have that.
It's weird, isn't it? It's sometimes perfection is not always better. You know what I mean? Like, I think you've explained it quite well with the SMG compared to the new one and what you liked about it. It's like, it's okay to have a flaw or a character trait here and there. It kind of adds to the experience. Because everything I used to read about that SMG, people used to say it was terrible and don't buy one. Even in articles now, Ben, do you want to get a used M3? They say avoid the SMG. But maybe it's not as bad as what all these people are saying.
I think it depends what you want. I mean, for me, and let's be honest, these 4-seater cars were a little bit of a compromise in terms of what I wanted at the time. It made it feel more like a sports car rather than a sporty car, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yep. All right. So there's another trend here, German cars. You like German cars. I know this is going to change shortly. You like German cars and you're in BMWs, you're in Porsches. You have the M3. It's a practical car. It works for your family. It all makes sense. I mean, a lot of other people have spoken about this where they change out a Porsche to get something more practical. What comes next? Is a Porsche coming after this, or the kids have to grow up a little bit first? How does it all work out?
So the kids were a little bit older, and then again, I got probably itchy feet after about 3 years, and by this time the 997s were out on the roads, and I just remember seeing these cars and thinking they look nice. And again, it was that this isn't a Porsche, this isn't a Porsche, this isn't a Porsche. Every time I was in the BMW, it just wasn't a Porsche.
Yeah.
And again, that nagging thought was there, and unless I did something about it, it was just going to be too hard to sort of live with. So it was. I was thinking, which 997 do I want? And this would be about 2012.
Okay.
That I was thinking about changing. The kids are old enough that I could just about they didn't have all the stuff to carry with them, so they could go in the back. They weren't big enough to complain. So I could sort of justify making a 911 work as a daily car.
Yes.
a family car, if you will. And once I'd sort of justified that in my head, it was like, right, there's no barrier here now to not looking for one.
So 2012, though, we're looking at 997.2, and we're looking at 997.2s being quite new on the market. So did you start looking at new 997s?
Again, the new were probably out of my financial, out of my price range, really. And I have to say, I've never bought a brand new car because I've always been mindful of, as soon as you drive it away, you just take a big hit in terms of how much it depreciates.
Yes.
I've never been able to actually consider that in terms of just the price point, but I've sort of always, I guess, taken advantage of someone else taking that hit in terms of depreciation. And by this time, the sort of 997.2s were sort of coming into my price range where I could make that work, really. And if I'm honest, I never really looked at a Gen 1 because I like the look of the lights on the Gen 2.
Yes.
And the LEDs at the front were also sort of another little small detail that just made me think that.
All right. So the 997.2 at that point was probably only under a year old, right? There wouldn't be many used ones on the market. Do you go to your local Porsche dealer and start seeing what they have in stock?
So again, I was looking, and there really weren't many around. And this was it had been bought literally about 9 months before and used very sparingly, and then sold back to the dealer. And this wasn't a local dealer to me. This was over in Manchester, so it was a good hour's drive away.
Okay.
And again, saw it on the Friday, booked a visit on the Saturday, and as soon as I walked into it, I knew I was buying that car, and then bought it again within about half an hour.
Okay, so quick decision, very quick decision.
Very quick. They made me an incredibly competitive offer for my M3, and I remember almost having to stab myself in the thigh with a biro, trying to stop myself from smiling just at how much money they said they would give me.
All right.
And once they'd done that, it was a done deal.
So that was it. So tell the listeners what you purchased, Ben. What was it exactly, and the options and everything? So
it was a 2010 997 Gen 2 Carrera 4S in black.
Nice.
And it was fully optioned, had virtually everything on it that I wanted apart from auto dimming mirrors.
Okay.
But it was a highly spec'd, not very much driven car. I can't remember exactly what options were standard, but it had, again, the Bose, the sat-nav, sort of the Xenons, heated seats, 18-way adjustable seats, which were incredibly comfortable. There was no option really that I didn't really have that I thought I really want this. Sports exhaust as well, which was the key, absolute key. That was the one thing that I'd learned is you like the noise, so you need to find a car which has got the sports exhaust.
Yes. So sorry, Ben, did you say it was manual?
This was a PDK.
PDK. So it has leather interior. It's fully optioned.
Full leather, extended leather across the dash and everywhere. It was a beautifully spec'd car.
Okay, so the first thing I bet when you noticed when you drove out of the dealership, you think back to your Boxster and you think about how different it was, how different it is inside the 911 and the different driving feel. How was that experience?
I have to say, it didn't feel that different.
Okay.
The noise was a little bit less in that the engine was just a little bit further away, but it was not significantly different. It felt not quite as sharp going into the corners. You could tell it was a little bit heavier, but I have to say it was such a well-sorted car. And I guess there's sort of the advances in the models is that I'm no motoring journalist, so I would struggle to tell you that it was a significantly different car. It felt like a Porsche, and that's the main thing for me. It was pin sharp. The turn-in was great. I know they say the four-wheel drive has got less turn-in than the two-wheel drive. On day-to-day driving, I couldn't honestly tell you I would notice a difference. This needed to be a winter car, which is why it needed to be the four-wheel drive. But I was delighted. Again, delighted.
Yeah, and I've said this before, the Carrera 4S 997. I mean, my friend Nick in the UK, who was on the very first owner stories, he's got a 0.1, but it's just and that's fully optioned as well. It's just that the rear of that 4S is just so beautiful. I mean, it really is. And I mean, going back all those years when you've bought your first Boxster, the 2.5, and you said you couldn't afford a 911. It must have been a great feeling when you're sitting in that 911 for the first time.
I'd always had that sort of 911 itch. I always thought at some point you need a 911. At some point you need a 911. And I thought if I'm going to do it, I can afford to do it. This is the one I'm going to do it with, and I'm going to do it properly with the one that I really want. And it was the red strip across the rear that sort of pushed me towards the 4S.
Yeah.
Again, I'm very sort of motivated by how the car looks, the visual appeal of it, and just the view from the rear with the LEDs and the red strip across it was what really sold it for me.
So do you think if this dealer wouldn't have given you such a great price on your M3 that you were trading, that you would have skipped this car? You would have let it go?
Oh no, I was buying that car. I was buying that car, and it was just, how expensive is this going to be for me?
It was just a bonus. It was a bonus by getting the extra trade-in, the better value of the trade-in.
Yeah, I'd got my sort of finance already in place. I knew the numbers, and
okay.
And when they came back with a number that was, several thousands more than I thought, I was thought, right, this is like the icing on the cake. But it's like, got to play it cool. Don't be too excited. And I knew I had to get it then and there.
Yes.
Because I could see someone else looking at that car out of the office that I was in, talking to the salesperson.
Oh, okay. So,
and I don't know whether they were pulling my leg. But they said they got a number of people coming to view that car because it had literally only come on the market. So I knew I'd got to make a decision very quickly. I was the first person in to see that car on the Saturday morning. And I knew that if I didn't get this car and there wasn't going to be a better car that came along, then I would regret it.
Okay, so you've got the car. You're enjoying it. It's a well-optioned car. Do you do anything else to it? Do you need to do anything else to it, or you keep it pretty much how it is?
Again, it was sort of the warranty thing really for me, is that, again, this was a daily driven car. It was my work commute car. It was going out in ice. It was going out in sun. So it needed to be reliable, and I needed to be able to not have problems if there was going to be mechanical issues. So I needed to keep this Porsche warranty on it and renew the warranty. So I didn't mess with anything that was going to potentially upset that. So again, I didn't do anything to that car apart from get a set of winter tires and wheels, which I changed over. But that was the only thing really. I didn't clean it as much as I should have done.
Really?
I learned my lesson. Is that I'm just too lazy. I'm just too lazy cleaning cars. And black.
Yeah, black. I was going to say black. I mean, I like black cars, and I've owned two black cars, two black Audis, and they were a nightmare to keep clean. That's for sure.
I think a combination of daily driving it, black cars, me not being particularly bothered about cleaning my cars is just not a good combination for keeping that looking as good as it could. So, okay. And every little scratch you just notice because it's just black and it just shows up that little bit more. But
this is a reasonably new car when you purchase it. So how did it go when you eventually decided to sell the car? Did that impact the value because you hadn't been looking after it as much as you should have? So
I guess, it'd been maintained well and all in sort of the service intervals. So, if I'd have cleaned it properly and sort of detailed it, and I did do that a couple of times, it's just probably not as much as that car deserved. When it came to trading in, it hardly depreciated at all from what I bought it.
Yeah, I didn't think it would have. Yeah. I mean, it's about the experience, isn't it? I did talk about this in a previous podcast episode, and after speaking with Bob, who daily drives his 991.2 GT3 in Canada and in Houston. It's about the experience. It doesn't really matter if you lose a bit of money. If you don't want to wash it all the time, that's okay. If you just want to drive it and enjoy it, if you want to drive it daily, if you want to drive it on the track, it's about the value you get out of the experience and not sort of worrying so much as well. So you've got the 911. You've reached really the pinnacle, so to speak, of what you've been sort of wanting for so many years. How long do you keep the 997.2 for?
I kept that for 3.5 years. When it was, and then it started getting a few little mechanical things that were going wrong with it. Coil packs went. Had a few PDK issues that were all sensor related, but and then the alarm started playing up, and it just started little niggles, nothing major, but just no longer becoming quite a reliable car as it was. And again, itchy feet, 3 years, I started looking around for the next thing. I thought about the...
Sorry, Ben. So is that still under warranty when all those things happened?
It was, and it was no issue. Our local dealer was fantastic. None of the problems were a problem to fix. I just got a little bit bored of having to think every time I get in the car, is there going to be another warning light on it?
Okay. Are they common issues with the 997.2?
No, I'd say none of these were sort of massively problematic. I mean, the coil packs had cracked and they needed replacing. The PDK sensor turned out to be just a sensor where it just detected a slight bit of slip on the drivetrain and then just threw up a few errors. So they're all sort of sensor easy fixes rather than any sort of significant mechanical issues from that side of things.
But this was enough for you to lose the confidence and feel like you wanted to get something else, or it just came to that 3-year period again and you just got itchy and thinking, I need something fresh, I need something new.
Yeah, it was a lot of itchy feet. I'd been to a Porsche experience or at Silverstone where you can take a car around their handling circuit, and I sort of went with a friend and we drove the 991.1 around that circuit. And I remember thinking, this is the car you're going to change into. And I took that car around. I remember thinking, I don't like this very much. It feels a bit more grown up. It feels a little bit less sharp. It feels a little bit less refined.
Right.
And I was expecting to get back into mine at the end of the day thinking, you've got to change. But I got back into mine and thought, actually, I don't want to upgrade.
Okay.
There's nothing the 991 had that I couldn't get, and then some in the 997.
Okay.
And then I wasn't sure really what to do. I knew I didn't want to upgrade to the 991 because I didn't feel like I'd be really upgrading.
Yes.
And then F-types were around at that time. And again, I've always been sold on the visual looks of the car. And again, the sound and the looks were what made me think you need to try this. At some point you need to try one of these, and it just was the right time.
So did you look for was this a new F-Type or was it a used F-Type?
So again, this was a used one. This was a one that had come from Jaguar's sort of corporate headquarters. It was probably about just under a year old, and it was the all-wheel drive V8R. So at the time, the sort of the top of the range, most powerful one.
Yeah, and the F-Type, and I don't know whether this is the same for US listeners or people in Europe, but the F-Type had a lot of hype about it, didn't it? It was when it first came out, it was a really interesting car. It was something that people wanted. How was the experience when you found this F-Type? Where you got it from a Jaguar dealer? You said?
I did. Now, if I could just have the car on the drive to look at, I would say the experience was fantastic. But it was a sporty GT car rather than a sports car. I think it weighed something like 1,800 kilos, and you could feel all of that weight going into a corner. I mean, it was ferociously fast, and it would spin its wheels. Or even though it was all-wheel drive, it would spin its wheels very quickly. But the handling wasn't great. The noise was amazing, but it's all exhaust noise. You could hardly tell there was any engine there at all. And after a while, that just got a little bit. All the crackles and the pops, it just started thinking, just seems a little bit like it's trying a little bit too hard.
Yeah, and you had a lot of problems with quality with the car?
I got to know our local Jaguar dealer very well.
Okay.
I had no end of electrical issues. The fans went on it twice. So twice on my commute home, I had to pull over, open the bonnet to let heat dissipate because it was overheating.
Really?
Windows didn't work. The sat-nav threw error codes and couldn't read the SD card. And the final straw was when there was a sensor that went wrong in the gearbox and I couldn't select reverse gear.
Really?
Which I think was highly entertaining for everyone at work. Not, me not being able to reverse out of my parking space, but I just lost confidence in that car.
It's a shame, isn't it? Because the F-Type is an attractive looking car. It really is. But these issues with Jaguar, they just don't seem to ever resolve them. They never seem to resolve their quality issues and all these other issues that their cars still have.
I can't fault our local dealer, but I would never have another Jaguar Land Rover product. It was just all electrical reliability.
So that's one car that you really were happy that you had a warranty then.
That is yes, very happy. And it's the one car I sold before upgrading to anything else. I just wanted out of that car. So I sold it to a local dealer about 6 months before the pandemic hit.
Okay, so this was late 2019 you sold it?
Yes. So I was going to change it in the spring. And I remember I just got fed up of it by just after the summer and I just wanted rid of it.
So how many years of ownership was that, Ben?
That was just over 3.
3 years. Okay, so you're keeping the cars, even though it's problematic, you still kept it for the 3 years anyway. Did you take a hit on that car? Did you lose a lot of money?
I took a huge hit. I think I lost something like about £40,000 on that car in that period of time, which I remember thinking at the time that this is a big hit. But equally, I didn't want to carry on paying for a car that I was going to spend a lot of time in the garage or at a dealer over winter. It just made no sense.
I'm not going to try and rub it in, Ben, but if you would have kept your 997.2, you would probably not have lost that much money.
You know what? If I tried to buy that car now, it would cost me more than I traded it in for.
Exactly.
I remember looking for that car afterwards and thinking, what have you done? What have you done? But you live and learn.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so you sell the car. You sell it before you've actually found something else. It's pre-pandemic. When do you find your next car, and is it a Porsche?
So it's my current car, and that is a 981 Spyder. And ultimately, this is what I wanted. But again, they were selling for well over list price at the time I was potentially looking. And again, that was probably a little bit out of what I wanted to pay. And I don't really have any kind of buying history from my local Porsche dealer. So there was no way they were going to give me an allocation for a new one. So I knew at some point I'd always wanted another Boxster, and I thought if you're going to get another Boxster, you might as well get the best one that you can possibly get. And I just thought the Spyders looked amazing, rare as anything. No one around me had one, so I hadn't seen one in the flesh. And if the pandemic hadn't hit, I probably would have just looked to try and find one of those sort of last spring, but it just was the wrong time, and I sort of waited about a year.
It's a really, the 981 I really like the 981 version. You know what I mean? I really do like it. I think it's a great shape. It's more resolved than the previous model. So where do you find the car, and tell the listeners exactly what you found and what you bought? So
I've got a GT Silver 981 Spyder, which I picked up from a dealer just outside London, not a Porsche dealer, because there were, at the time I was looking maybe at most 10 on Auto Trader in the country. So they're few and far between. And I thought I'm going to be sensible at the options. I know what I want. It's got to have a certain things. It's got to have the 918 bucket seats. It's got to have extended leather. Ideally, I'd like some kind of contrast detailing on the inside. I want the sat nav. And ideally, I'd have liked reversing camera. This is the one thing it didn't have on it, or I thought it didn't have on it, a reversing camera. I'd seen this car come on the market, but I wasn't in a place to buy it. And at that time, it had gold wheels and gold badges. I remember thinking, that's a nice car, but I do not like those wheels. And it sold very quickly. And I just was looking on Instagram just one Saturday morning, and I happened to see that the dealer was taking it back into stock. And I thought, that's it. That is the car I'm having. And again, I messaged the dealer, and before he'd taken it into stock, I'd paid a deposit to basically get that car.
Fantastic. Yeah, the Spyders do keep their value, don't they? They're a bit like Targas in a way. They're very hard to come by, and they are very they really do keep their value. So you like the open top experience. I mean, you've gone from a Boxster, you went into your 911, and now you've gone back to a Boxster Spyder. How was the first feeling when you drove that car? I know you had the Jaguar in between, but did you have any regrets from not going back into a 911? No, I felt I'd sort of ticked that box, and I think at the time 911s, they'd gone turbocharged.
My friend has just picked up a 992 Carrera 2, and we've been out for that a couple of times, and it is so fast. And the thing about the Jaguar is that the speed is just unusable. The power is unusable. As a day-to-day proposition, you have to back off the accelerator before you've even started. And I think probably the peak car for me has probably been and gone.
Right.
None of the new ones appeal to me. They just don't seem mechanically quite as involved. There's a lot of electronics. There's a huge number of screens, and they just don't do anything for me. So I was never going to go forward in terms of new models, and started looking backwards, which is why it was sort of the 981 Spyder.
Yeah, that's what I was saying when you said you went on that 991.1 on the experience, and you didn't really see it being much difference to your 997.2. I was wondering whether it came into your thought process before you got the Spyder, whether you were going to look back at an air-cooled or something even older. That's what I was what I was suggesting, but that didn't come into your thought process.
No, again, I knew I wanted another Boxster, so it was that sort of, I want another Boxster, and here's one with a 911 engine in it, so this seems like a bit of a win-win, really.
Yeah, Steve is a really big fan of the Boxster Spyder. I know he's always in his back of his mind wouldn't mind having one for his wife. I like them. I really do like them, and I like the 981. I know everyone's raving about the new one, the 4.0 and whatever, but the 981 is really a nice looking car. Is the top, and this is a question that everyone thinks about, is the top as difficult to take off as people keep saying?
No, it really isn't. I mean, it's, once you learn how to do it, I can get it up and down in probably about 20 seconds, if I'm honest. The biggest pain is sort of having to turn the ignition on to sort of latch it open and latch it closed. But the actual operation of just putting the roof up and down is no big deal. And in many ways, that's exactly what I wanted from this car. I wanted a car that was a bit of a compromise in terms of it wasn't comfortable. It wasn't just push a button and the roof closed. It felt like a bit of an occasion, a sense of adventure, something that was very much a car to take out for a drive rather than just a potter to the shops. So I like the impracticality of the roof.
Yeah, exactly. I'll just tell the listeners, actually, because I forgot to mention it earlier. If you want to go and see Ben's cars and look at what his Spyder looks like, it's at Peaks, Peaks, Peaks Porsche on Instagram. I'll put the link in the description of this podcast. But just go and check out Ben's cars. Tell him you heard his story on Owner's Stories, and make sure you give him a follow at the same time. What else about the Boxster? So what have you done? You basically bought this car during the pandemic, correct? That's what you said. You bought it pre-pandemic.
Essentially bought it sight unseen. The first time I saw it was when I was picking it up to bring it home.
So you didn't get any checks done on this car then as well? This is another one where you didn't think you needed to do anything?
I agree. That was a bit of a gamble, but it had just been serviced by a Porsche dealer literally a week before I was due to pick it up, and it was still within Porsche warranty. It hadn't done many miles, so it was a bit of a calculated gamble. But again, I didn't think I could be picky on spec. This was a highly spec'd car. I mean, it also had ceramics as well.
Oh, right. So that's right. It does. Yeah. Fantastic.
And I just knew that if I didn't get this car, there wasn't going to be another one that was going to come up, and I would regret it. So a bit of a calculated gamble. So far, it's paid off. I don't think I'll renew the warranty when it comes up for renewal, because as I found out, it got a reversing camera fitted by the previous owner, which I'm pretty sure that won't get through the 111 point check. And he's also done some cosmetic things, that he's added GT4 side scoops onto the side intakes.
Oh, okay. So you won't be able to get the warranty because of those issues.
And that I have to say that troubled me just a little bit, having had sort of long history of getting Porsche warranties, but the rear visibility is so appalling, is that I would rather have a reversing camera rather than a warranty, because you can see nothing out of the back of this car. Right. So it was a price worth paying.
So is it this summer where you're going to really start enjoying it? Have you actually had a chance to enjoy it with all the lockdown that's been happening in the UK?
Yeah, so I mean, I bought it in February, and it's sat in the garage for a number of months, and it's only really started coming out as we've been able to get out and about. And I've got, this morning went to a meet in Sheffield Centre with some other owners, and it seems like things are just gradually starting up again. I've got a trip around Wales planned with a few other Porsche owning friends later on the year. So it just feels like the opportunities to use it now that the weather is picking up are just going to increase. And yeah, it's brilliant. It's exactly what I wanted.
So is this the car, Ben, that you think you might try to hold on to? Whereas if you need another car, a more practical car, you'll just buy a practical car and this one will stay in the garage? Or is this one going to be the 3 to 4 year term that you usually have?
I think this one might be the one that's different. Mind you, you asked me in 3 years' time. Who knows? But I've got used. I've got a Ford Fiesta as a runaround, so this can very much be a sort of occasion car. But I love the way it looks. The sound's amazing. The drive is it. And if I'm honest, I think it's probably the best Porsche I've ever had. And again, I don't know what I'd upgrade to. Compared
to your other Boxsters, is there apart from the power, was there anything else that you noticed that was different when you were driving the Spyder?
The steering is a lot sharper.
Okay.
A lot sharper. It goes around corners far better than the 911 on the Boxsters. I don't know whether it's a bit of the GT4 suspension, but it is incredibly responsive, sort of just going around some country roads. It corners incredibly flat, but the ride quality is very, very good. I don't know how they've done it. It's so comfortable driving around town, yet you can throw it around the country roads and it will just stick like glue.
Do you think the seats are a part of that experience, though? You think the seats make that feel different? The whole experience feel different?
Again, the carbon buckets are not everyone's cup of tea because, the position they give you is the position you've got. And luckily for me, I find them quite comfortable. But again, I wanted the buckets, even though I'd never sat in them, because I wanted that sense of it feeling as much like a race car feel in many ways on the road.
I mean, it looks fantastic with it. I'm looking at your Instagram now, if you're wondering what I'm looking at. I'm looking at your Instagram now, and, the yellow stitch detail. I really love the silver, the GT silver with the yellow stitch, the contrast stitch. It's just fantastic with the deviated stitch. And also you've got the black wheels. I mean, either, the black wheels or even the satin platinum wheels always look good with the GT silver as well. It's a you should hold on to this one, Ben. It really is a great looking Boxster, that's for sure. Great looking Spyder.
Yeah, I agree. It's probably the nicer. I thought the F-Type was a nice looking car. I think this is nicer.
Yeah, no, that rear when you do the view from the back, that quarter sort of rear view, it looks just it's such a great line. It really is a great line. And I think the silver is to me the best color in the Spyder. I really do. I think it's the best color.
It was a short list of silver or the sapphire blue. But sapphire blue and ceramics, I think there maybe is one or two in the country. So if a sapphire with ceramics had come up, I'd have probably gone for that. But
yeah, the blue's good. But because you've got the black wheels, you've got the yellow ceramics, you've got the yellow deviated stitch, it all just comes together in such a great way. It really is a beautiful car. You've got a great one there, that's for sure.
Thank you. I mean, that's why I got the wheels changed from the gold to the black. I thought that would just tie that all together, and I'm delighted how it looked. I think it's such a nice looking car.
Yeah, I bet you can't. I mean, it's a beautiful day here in London today, but I bet you can't wait for that hot weather to come out and start driving more and more.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're almost at the end of the podcast. So everyone likes to know, like, where you live in Sheffield, or what are the best roads? What are your favorite roads, or roads that you'd like to take your Spyder on that you haven't taken them on already?
So probably my favorite stretch of road to drive on is the Snake Pass, which goes from Sheffield to Manchester. And it essentially goes across the Peak District, and it's a series of reasonably fast, quite tight turns in places. There's sort of opportunities to sort of change down to second and third, and then the odd time to really rev it out a reasonable bit. But you've got to be there early because it gets very, very busy, and it's the main commuter route between Sheffield and Manchester. So either an early morning or a late evening, it's a great road to drive across. There's some really nice, quieter roads through the peaks. The best drive I've ever done in this country is actually through Wales. So driving essentially around Snowdonia is what we're going to try and reproduce later on. So if it's not the Snake Pass, I'm going to take it across to North Wales later on this year.
North Wales. Okay. Good to know. Good to know. There's some great roads in the UK, though, isn't there? There's some really great roads in Scotland and etc. That's for sure.
Scotland's definitely on the list. As is the Lake District as well. I've had some good trips around the Lake District, so those are all on the list. We're fortunate in the Peak District to have some really good roads, but you've got to pick your times and you've got to pick your routes. But there's lots I've yet to discover.
Absolutely, sounds fantastic. And you said to me in your message you're a bit of a watch fan as well. I always like the correlation between our Porsches and watches. There seems to be a lot of us that are that have the obsession. That's for sure. Yeah,
very much so. I'm wearing what a large part of the money I actually got back from the Jaguar. I invested that into a watch. I thought this is at least something I'm not going to lose a huge amount of money on.
What did you get?
I got a Deep Sea, James Cameron Deep Sea.
Oh, you got the Deep Sea. Nice.
Yeah.
Did you get allocation for that, or did you buy it grey market?
Oh no, again, if I walked into my local Rolex dealer, they would. In fact, I did actually try, and they did the courteous thing of taking my details, and I'm very sure that card went straight in the bin. So I bought it again from a grey market dealer, and that's probably one of the very few things I have bought and not lost any money on so far. So
yeah, they're definitely appreciating asset. I mean, I tried. I have to say, we'll just talk about watches quickly, but I tried on the Deep Sea in Bahrain at the Rolex AD. There, they didn't have the they didn't have the James Cameron. They just had the black. And I tried it on, and I could have had that, or I could have taken my C Dweller 43. And I always wanted the Deep Sea. Like I always wanted it, Ben. But then when I tried it on, and even though I've got a few Panerais as well, even though when I tried it on, it just, for some reason, it just felt too big on me, which is, I don't know whether I was just in the wrong frame of mind that day. And I kind of keep thinking maybe I should try one on again, but it just felt too big.
I think about this C Dweller you've got, I think if I had tried the one you've got on, which I think is the 43, I'm pretty sure I would think this looks better on me. But again, it was the dial I wanted, and I can justify it to myself that it looks fine on me. I've got skinny wrists, but they're quite flat wrists, so it doesn't look ridiculous. But it's a toss up between the two. I think they're both fantastic looking.
Yeah, yours
watches.
Is. I mean, I think if the Rolex dealer in Bahrain had the James Cameron one, I probably would have bought it because it is. I've always loved that dial. I think that's what it was. I think if they had that one, I probably still would have bought it. You know what I mean? Due to the rarity and due to the color and everything like that, it really is a beautiful watch.
Yeah, I'd really like a Polar Explorer too, but the values on those have just gone ridiculous. And I think I missed my boat there, to be honest.
Well, I have a good relationship with the Rolex dealer in Bahrain. When I bought my Explorer 2, the blackface one, I could have got the white one. I could have taken the white one as well. And I declined to take it. And I'm thinking maybe I should have bought both of them.
Be a healthy down payment on a GT3 if you did.
And that was pretty much retail, so that was always good. All right, Ben, that's great. Thank you so much for. We've come to the hour. We always like to keep these just over an hour, under an hour, I should say. We're just a little bit over. Thanks so much for sharing your Porsche story today.
Thank you. And I just want to say thank you. I know I said to you before we started recording, but I started listening to PorscheCooled when I started looking for my Spyder. And it's been a lot of fun hearing everyone's owner stories and just hearing about all the little details that I sort of fuss over about stitching and trim. So that's really been a lot of fun, Michael. So big thank you to for putting this together. It's been really enjoyable following the series.
Thanks, Ben. I'm glad you've been enjoying it. Yeah, it's like our obsession makes sense when we talk about it, and we know there's so many other people out there with the same obsession, isn't it? It's kind of like
absolutely.
That. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Ben. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being on PorscheCooled Owner Stories. So everyone, that was Ben coming in from Sheffield. He's multiple Porsche owner, Boxster S, 997.2, Carrera 4S. and the beautiful, beautiful Boxster Spyder that he owns now. Like I said, go to @PeaksPorsche, give Ben a follow, have a look at his cars. You won't be disappointed. All right, that's Owner Stories for today. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.